Hey, Chevra, what's going on? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Gimel of Masechta Pesachim, Daf 3. It is a cool daf. So the daf starts off with 4 more proofs that or means night. So yesterday we kind of struggled to find some proofs to see, does or mean night or does it mean day? And most of them were rejected. 2 of them kind of went through. And now we are going to have 4 proofs in a row that or means night. And then we spend much of the daf discussing how you should speak in a clean way. And, well, that's what we will discuss today. We will begin all the way at the bottom of Daf Beis, Amud Beis, the last 3 words of the page. Mosif Mar Zutra. We are now in Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. That Mar Zutra asks a question. Now, Chevra, you have to focus a little bit over here. This might be a new concept. I don't remember if it came up before. Hamapeles or l'shmonim ve'echod. That a woman who miscarries on the night before day 81. What is this talking about? So, I believe it's Parshas Tazria. At the beginning of Parshas Tazria, in Sefer Vayikra, the Parsha discusses a woman who gives birth. If she gives birth to a boy, so then for the first 7 weeks, she has Tamei Tuma, right? That any dam, if she sees any blood that comes out of her body on the first week, that is Tamei blood. For the next 33 days, any dam that she sees is dam tahara, Tamei tahara. It is pure blood. It does not make her Tamei. That is for a total of 40 days. Now, if she gives birth to a girl, so then you have the same thing, but instead of 7 and 33, it's 14 and 66. So for the first 2 weeks, any dam that she sees will be Tamei, and for the next 66 days, any dam that she sees is going to be Tahor. Now, at the end of these periods of time, 40 days for a boy, 80 days for a girl. Now, we're now talking specifically about 80 days for a girl, so meaning the context of this brisa is 80 days for a girl. So let's talk about that. So after 80 days, on day 81, this woman brings a korban yoledes. She brings a korban. I think it's 2 birds, right? So, where were we? Fine. So, now here's the thing. Okay. So, on day 81, this woman brings a korban. Now, what happens if she gives birth to a girl? After 2 weeks, the period where she sees any dam, if after 2 weeks she sees any blood, that is tahor blood, fine. She goes to the mikvah, and now she gets pregnant again. And then she miscarries. So the question is, do you have to bring an additional korban yoledes for the miscarriage? It counts as having given birth, and she would have to bring a korban yoledes. So we say that if the miscarriage happens before the end of this 80-day period, so then the korban that she brings at the end of the 80-day period will cover the initial birth that she gave, as well as the miscarriage. Okay. Now, if she miscarries after day 81 or even on day 81, well then, since she was already obligated to bring the korban for the initial birth at the time that the miscarriage happened, well then she has to bring 2 separate korbanos, one for the first birth and one for the miscarriage. Cool, okay, got that? So if the miscarriage happens before there is an obligation to bring a korban for the first birth, well then the korban that she brings for the first birth will work for the first birth and the miscarriage. If she miscarries once she was already obligated to bring the korban for the first birth, i.e. on day 81, well then she will have to bring 2 korbans, one for the first birth and one for the miscarriage. Great. Here's where the question comes up. What if she miscarries on the night in between day 80 and day 81? Because the fact of the matter is, in practice, she's unable to bring this korban for having given birth 80 days prior until day 81. Okay, she can't bring it at night. So, on the one hand, she wasn't yet in a place where she was actually able to technically bring the korban, because she has to wait till the next day. So you can make the argument that when she brings her korban the next day, on day 81, it should cover the miscarriage that happened the night before. On the other hand, you can argue that, well, day 80 is complete, right? It doesn't, right? You have 80 days, where the first 2 weeks are tameh, the next 66 days are tahor. Once that's over, if she sees any dam nida, if she sees any dam after day 80, it will be dam tameya. So therefore, I should say that this 80-day period is over, and if she miscarries that night, well then she would have to bring 2 korbans, one for the initial birth and one for the miscarriage. So those are the 2 ways of looking at it. So now, hamapeles or l'shmonim ve'echad. So a woman who miscarries on the night between day 80 and day 81, so Beis Shammai potun, Beis Shammai says, look, you just need to bring 1 korban yoledes for the initial birth as well as for the miscarriage. Whereas Beis Hillel says, no, you have to bring 2 separate korbanos, one for the initial birth and one for the miscarriage. Amrullah and Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So now Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, right? They're questioning, right? Beis Hillel says she would have to bring 2 korbanos. Beis Shammai says that the korban that she brings for the initial birth covers both. So Maishna or Shmonim ve'echad miyom Shmonim ve'echad. So question number 1, Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai, is why should the night following day 80, i.e. the night of day 81, be any different than day 81 itself? Of course we know that a day begins with the night before. Was that even the first daf of all of Shas? I think, right? So the day starts with the night before. So therefore, what's the difference if she miscarries in day 81 or the night, of day 81, in between day 80 and day 81? It's all the same day. So on account of that, she should have to bring 2 korbanos. And additionally, im shiva lo letuma lo yishve lo lekorban. Now, if she sees any blood on the night between day 80 and day 81, well then that will be dmei tum'ah, i.e. the 80-day period is over, and the last 66 days of that 80-day period during which any dam she saw was tahor is finished, that's over. Now any dam that she sees in the night between day 80 and day 81 is going to be tameh. Well, therefore, if this whole 80-day period is complete, well then if she miscarries on that night, she should have to bring separate korbanos. Fine. That was a little complex. That's probably the most complex thing of the daf. That's the machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai about a woman who miscarries on the day between day 80 and the night between day 80 and day 81. Now, here's the point, Chever. Beis Hillel Beis Shammai ma'ishna or shmonim ve'echad miyom shmonim ve'echad, from the fact that Beis Hillel responded to Beis Shammai and they said, well, why should there be any distinction between or shmonim ve'echad as opposed to yom shmonim ve'echad? So we're comparing yom and or. That must mean shmamina or urta hu shmamina. Clearly then, or means night. Okay? Meisvei, we have another question on Rav Huna, who says that or means day. Yachol yenechol or l'shlishi. So this is talking about a korban shlamim. We're really going to talk about a korban toda and a korban shlamim. So what's a korban shlamim? So korban shlamim is a offering, I think just like a nadava, whatever it is. I think like if you just say, I'm going to bring a korban to the Beis Hamikdash, I think that would be a shlamim. Now, a shlamim can be eaten on the day that it is slaughtered, as well as that night, and the next day, right? Shnei yomim v'layla echad, for 2 days and the night in between. A korban toda is brought, right, whenever you would say Birkas HaGomel, right? It's Pasuk Kuf Zayin in Sefer Tehillim, I believe, that talks about it. We talked about it, I think, in the last parak of Brachis. So a korban toda you bring for when you have reason to give thanks, and that could be in the day that it's slaughtered as well as the following night, right? Liyom v'layla. So the Gemara says Yochel yenechol or lishlishi. Let me ask you a question. When it comes to a korban shlamim that you can eat for 2 days and the night in between, maybe I can actually eat it for 2 days and 2 nights. Maybe I can eat it the day that it's slaughtered, that night, the following day, and maybe also the night afterwards. V'dinu, and I can even make an argument to say so. Zvachim nechalim liyom echad. Well, zvachim, in referring to korban toda, can be eaten liyom echad, for one day. V'shlamim nechalin l'shnei yomim. And a korban shlamim can be eaten for 2 days. Malahalan laila achar hayom. Well, just like when it comes to korban toda, you eat it the day that it's slaughtered as well as the following night. Afkan, I'll say over here by shlamim as well, laila achar hayom, that you can also eat it the night following the day, i.e., you can eat it for 2 days and the night in between, but also the night following that second day. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, Biyom zivchachem ye'achel, that on the day that you slaughter the korban shlamim, it can be eaten umi machras, as well as the next day, v'anosar ad yom, right? And whatever is left ad yom ashlishi, right? Until day 3. But ad yom, we darshan from the words ad yom, be'od yom hunechal, that the korban shlamim can only be eaten while it is still daytime. Ve'enunechal le'or shlishi, but it is unable to be eaten le'or shlishi. It is unable to be eaten on the or of the shlishi, meaning on the night before day 3, the night after day 2. Okay, fine. Yochi yisarif miyad. Okay, fine. So it says vanosa v'menu ad yom hashlishi ba'ish tisarif, that whatever is left over on day 3 you have to burn. Okay. So let me ask you, if you have a korban shlamim and you didn't manage to eat it on the 2 days and the night between that was allotted for it, so is it possible that you can burn it already immediately following day 2, right? So you didn't chaperine on day 1 or the night following or day 2. Can you burn it immediately the night following day 2? So vidinu, and I can make the argument, zvachim nechalin liyom v'layla echad, that korban toda can be eaten on the day that it's slaughtered as well as the following night. V'shlamim nechalin l'shnei yom v'layla echad, and korban shlamim can be eaten for 2 days and the night in between. Just like when it comes to a korban toda, so immediately after you can no longer eat it, you burn it, meaning you can eat it on the day it's slaughtered as well as the following night. Once that following night is over, i.e. on the next day, you burn it. So afkan, I'll make the argument that here also by korban shlamim, techef la'achila sreifa, right? Meaning before we were talking about korban toda, which is the day that it's slaughtered as well as the following night, you can eat it and then you burn it immediately the next day. So I'll make the argument that when it comes to a korban shlamim, that immediately after you can no longer eat it, you burn it, right? Meaning that a korban shlamim, you eat it on the day that it's slaughtered, the following night, and the next day. And so I'll make the argument that immediately once you can no longer eat it, you burn it, i.e. the night after day 2. Talmud Lomar, therefore it says, Vanosar mi b'sara zevach bayom ashlishi ba'ish yisarif, that which is left over from the meat of the offering, bayom ashlishi ba'ish yisarif, that on day 3 you burn it. So bayom atasarif v'ya atasarif balayla, that you don't burn it you burn it during the day, you do not burn it at night. So there you have it, that a korban shlamim, you only eat it for 2 days and the night in between, and you burn it on day 3, not the night in between day 2 and day 3. And all of that was to say that brisa says or l'shlishi, referring to the night in between day 2 and day 3. So we see that or means night. Okay. So far on this daf, on daf gimel, we've so far brought 2 proofs that or means night. Let's bring a third. Tashma, come in here, or shel Yom HaKippurim, on the night of Yom Kippur, mispal sheva u'misvade. So in the Shmona Esrei of Mariv on Yom Kippur night, there are 7 brachas in the Shmona Esrei, and there's also vidui, like the al chetz. Shachris mispal sheva u'misvade. In the morning prayers, you pray, you say 7 blessings in Shmona Esrei, and you do vidui. B'musaf mispal sheva u'misvade. At Musaf, it's also 7 brachas and a vidui. B'mincha mispal sheva u'misvade. Same thing at Mincha, there's 7 blessings and a vidui. I have a letter here that adds that it's the same for Ne'ilah as well. Now, Be'arvis, at Mariv on Motzoi Yom HaKippurim, mispal me'en shmona asar. So then you do an abridged version of the Shmona Esrei. Chanina ben Gamliel Omer says of Chanina ben Gamliel, Mishum Avosaf, in the name of his fathers, Mispal Shmona Esrei Shlemis you pray 18 complete brachis, because you need to say Havdalah in the bracha of Chonein Hadas, so therefore say all 18 blessings, Alma or Urtahu, Shema Minah. So we see that or means night, right? Because the Brisa had said, or Shal Yom Kippurim, that on the night of Yom Kippur you say 7 blessings and Vidoy. So once again we see the or is night. And one final Brisa to drive it home, Tashma, come in here, the Tani Devei Shmuel, that was taught in the Besmedrash of Shmuel, Leile Arba Asar, that on the night of the 14th, Bodkin es HaChametz L'Oraner, we search for chametz to the light of a candle, alma or urtahu. So we see pretty explicit here that we do bedikas chametz on the night of the 14th. So we see that in our Mishnah when it says or, it must mean night. Ela ben Rav Huna uben Rav Yehuda d'chuli alma or urtahu. So the Gemara says, you know what? It's pretty clear that or means night. We had 2 proofs yesterday. We have another 4 today. We don't have any Brises that succeeded in proving that or means day. So we have a pretty strong case against Rav Huna who says that or means day. So the Gemara says, you know what? Yeah, Rav Huna agrees that or means day. Okay, so then what's the deal with this naghe thing that he says? V'lo plige, and they don't argue. Mar ki asrei umar ki asrei. Rav Huna was just using is the right word nomenclature, was just using the phrases of where he's from, and Rav Yehuda was using the phrases where he's from. Ba'asr de Rav Huna, who could tell me where Rav Huna lived? It's actually not so simple. I think that the simple answer is that Rav Huna lived in Sura, although interestingly, in Masechta Eruvin, on Daf Samach Beis and Beis, I think, there was a Rashi that says that Rav Huna was in Pumbedisa, I think, which is, that was a big chiddush for me. But anyways, I think generally we assume that Rav Huna was in Surah. So Karu Naghe. So where Rav Huna was, I guess maybe in Surah, they refer to night as Naghe. And there's the Masoras Hashas says that it's like a Sagi Nahor kind of thing. It's like it's like somebody who's blind, we call him Sagi Nahor, somebody who has a lot of light. So Naghe, like Noga, is like light. So Naghe is like a reference to night. It's kind of like an opposite kind of thing. A euphemism maybe. Va'asr to Rav Yehuda karu leile, and where Rav Yehuda was, who could tell me where Rav Yehuda was? Of course, he was in Pumbedisa. So they call or means night. Okay. They call it leile, right? So or means night. The question is, Rav Huna says nage because that's what they call night where he's from. Rav Yehuda says leile because that's what they call night where he's from. In fact, the Gemara wants to know, V'tanadidon my time lo katani leile. So how come our Tana didn't just make things easy and say Lele? I mean, it's using the word, the choice of using the word or definitely complicated things. So why not just go for the simpler Lele? So the Gemara answers Lishna Ma'ayu Dunakad, because they prefer to use a more proper phrase, which is, it's nicer to use the word or than to use the word like Lila or something. Right, whereas they had the brisa from the Beis Medrash of Shmuel, Leile. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and it's like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Amr Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Olam Bayotzi Adam Davar Meguna Mipiv. Oh, a person should never release something negative or unclean from his mouth. Sharei Ike Makasav Shmona Osius V'lo Hotzi Davar Meguna Mipiv. The pasuk went out of its way by 8 letters to avoid saying something not nice. Shene'amar, as the pasuk says, mina behema tahora, okay, from the pure animals, umina behema asher einena tahora, and from the animals that are not tahor. Meaning, it doesn't say mina behema tahora, mina behema tmeya. It doesn't say that. It says mina behema tahora, mina behema asher einena tahora. Right, the animals that are pure and the animals that are not pure. Instead of saying the animals that are impure. Okay, fine, and that adds an additional 8 letters. Right, to have to go out of its way, they had to add 8 more letters than it would have if it just said Hatmeya. Rav Papa Amar Teisha, Rav Papa says the pasuk even goes out of its way 9 letters. Shenamar ki yebcha ish asher lo yatar mikre laila. Somebody who will be not pure because he had a seminal emission, right? It could have just said ish tameh, but instead it says, right, ish asher lo yatahor. So that adds an additional 9 9 letters. Ravina Amar Eser Vav de Tahor. Ravina says that if you count it, it's actually an additional 10 letters that the Torah went out of its way because of the Vav of Tahor adds an additional letter. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar says Rav Acha bar Yaakov Sheish Esrei, it's actually 16 letters that the Torah went out of its way to avoid saying Tameh. Shenemar ki Amar Mikrehu Bilti Torahu Kilo Torahu. So that whole thing of what was it? I think Bilti Torahu Kilo Tahor. You could have just said Tameh, and then it would be that right. But instead of saying Tameh, it says Bilti Torahu Kilo Tahor. So it adds an additional 16 letters. So we see that the Torah goes out of its way to avoid saying the word Tameh. It would rather say things like Lo Tahor. Tanya Devei Rabbi Shmuel was taught in the Besmedrash of Rabbi Shmuel Lo Olam Yisapar Adam Bilashon Nikiya. A person should always speak in a clean way. Shenemar B'Zav, as it says by a Zav, a man who sees some kind of non-normal, abnormal emission. So it says by a Zav. So Zav, of course, is an Avatuma. And there's the concept of Midras Hazav. If a Zav sits on something, so then it becomes an Avatuma like him. So it says in the context of Midras Hazav, it says Merkav, anything that he might ride on. Now, to ride on something, like let's say he's riding on a donkey that has a saddle. So I guess the donkey itself, I never really thought about that. I don't know. But whatever. So when you ride on something, you kind of put one leg on either side of the animal that you're riding. So in the context of a man, the pasuk doesn't have a problem describing riding. But uveisha kra'o moshav. But by a woman, rather than describing a woman who's riding on an animal and opening up her legs in order to ride on this animal, they'd rather avoid that sugya and just say sitting. Okay. V'omer, and similarly, it says, "Vativchar l'shon arumim, v'sivchar l'shon arumim," and choose the tongue of the wise. V'omer, and it says, "V'dasvasai baru milelu," and the knowledge of my lips speak clarity. So my v'omer, how come we need all of these psukim? Why isn't it enough? Right? How come we needed basically 3 proofs? One from the Mishkav Umoshav thing by Ezav. One by V'sivchar l'shon arumim, the other one say bar midas fasei bar milelu. So v'chitei mahanimile b'doraisa ava b'dorabanan lo. Well, because if it's going to enter your mind to say, well, when it comes to things in the Torah, right? The Torah always wanted to speak in lashon nikiya, but not necessarily the rabbis. The rabbis could say whatever they want. So tashma v'omer, and it says v'tivchar l'shon arumim, and choose the tongue of the wise, that even the chachamim should speak properly. And if you're going to say, okay, fine, so the Torah speaks properly, the rabbis speak properly, but when I'm just hanging out with my friends, maybe I could say whatever I want. So therefore it says, that in general my lips speak of clear things. I guess clean things. One second. By a woman, it doesn't say merkav of riding. V'yoksiv, but the pasuk says by Rivka, v'atakum Rivka v'nairosea, that Rivka and her attendants got up, v'takavna al agmalim, and they rode on the camels. So we see that they were riding camels. No, so the pasuk, the Torah talks about riding. So asum shum bi'asusa d'gmalim orchahi. Well, in that particular case, when you ride a camel out of fear of the camel, you wouldn't, what's that called? Side saddle or something? Whatever it is, it's better to sit properly on the camel, even if it means you gotta put one leg on either side of the camel. So, since Lamaisa, she was riding the camel properly, so the Torah records that. V'yoksiv, but doesn't the pasuk say, Vayikach Moshe es ishto v'ezbanav vayarkivim al hachamor, that Moshe took his wife and his children and his sons and he had them ride on the donkey? So we see that he's talking about his wife, Tzipora, riding a donkey. So Hasam, Mishum Banav Orchu. Well, over there it says that not just that he put his wife on the donkey, but also his sons. So in the context of the sons, we were talking about riding. V'yoksiv, but the pasuk says by Abigail, V'yocheves al hachamor, that when she went to meet the soldiers of David, so it says that she was riding on the donkey. So she was riding on a donkey. What's the deal? So asum shum bi asusa delelia orchahu. So over there, because it was nighttime, so like, yeah, you're gonna ride the donkey normally at nighttime to make sure that you don't get hurt or anything, and that's what happened. So the Torah says that she was riding a donkey. What do you want me to tell you? Viba isema, or if you want, I will say, right, mishum biasusa delelia leka. No, there's no problem. There's not necessarily a fear of riding a donkey at night, but mishum biasusa de Davidika. But out of fear, right? There's like a fear when it comes to to King David. So therefore, it's normal in that case that you would ride a donkey normally. So the Tanakh records it as such. Or you could say that there wasn't necessarily a fear of King David. But there was fear of, right, it says that she was descending a mountain. So when you're descending a mountain, it makes sense that you're going to ride a donkey normally. So the Navi records that as well. Wait a second. We brought 4 examples, or like whatever, maybe like 3.5 kind of examples earlier, about places where the Torah went out of its way to avoid writing the word tameh. But the Torah, like, let's be honest, the Torah writes tameh all over the show. So well, any place where there wouldn't be any additional letters to write tameh versus tahor, so, or really to write any things that would be equivalent. So then the Torah will always prefer to write the nicer way. But kol echad the nefishin mile. But in general, if it were more lengthy to write the nicer way, well then mishtay b'lashon ktsara. Well then the Torah will choose the shorter version, right? So in general, if in order to write a nicer way, the Torah would have to add letters and go out of its way, so it'll just write the more concise way, even if it is means that it's not necessarily as nice of a way to write, which is exactly what makes those other examples earlier the exceptions to the rule, which are to teach us that, well, since in those cases the Torah is going out of its way to write in a proper way, we should also speak in proper ways. Now, as we just said, that if in the event that the Torah will have to write more in order to write in a nicer way, it'll just go for the more succinct way, even if it is less nice. Well then, Kedam Rav Huna, it's like Rav Huna says, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, V'amrila, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Some say it's Rav Huna who says the name of Rav, Mishum Rav Meir, the name of Rav Meir. L'olam mishana adav v'tamido derech tzara. A person should always teach his students in a succinct way, so that they will remember it well. But then the Gemara says, wait a second, just whenever it would be the same to write the nicer way versus the less nice way, so the Torah will always go for the nicer option. In the context of Abigail that we saw earlier, when she rode towards the soldiers of David, so it says that she was rocheves ala chamor. Now, yosheves is the same length as rocheves. So how come it went with rocheves? It should have just gone with yosheves, which is a nicer way of saying it. It's the same amount of letters. V'kamar rocheves, and unless it says rocheves, racheves ksiv. The Gemara says, well, actually, take another look. It doesn't say rocheves with a vav, it says racheves without a vav. We pronounce it rocheves, but it's written racheves. And therefore, that's why I went with rocheves, even though it's not as nice as yosheves, but we dropped the vav. Okay. There were 2 students who were sitting before Rab. Oh. So one of the students of Rab said, right, they had just finished learning and they were wiped, and they said, wow, I'm as tired as a tired pig. Whereas the other one said, wow, I am so drained, I'm like a tired goat. So, like, I guess goat is a nicer way of saying than pig, because we Jews, we don't connect so stark with the pigs. So, velo ishtoi Rav bahadi da'ech, and from that time on, Rav did not want to speak to the fellow who mentioned pigs. So, okay, fine. So, he should have spoken in a cleaner, nicer way. There were 2 students who were sitting before Hillel. One of them was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Wow, very cool. Also very cool. Some say it was 2 students in front of Rebbe, and one of those students was Rabbi Yochanan. I was wondering the other day, in Masechta Eruvin and Daf Nun Dalet, I believe, who were Rabbi Yochanan's teachers, and I've actually kind of come up with a few. So in that context, he was talking about when he was studying by Reb Hoshaya Bribi, who we said over there was Reb Hoshaya Bribi in his generation was like Reb Meir in his generation, i.e. very special, the greatest of his generation. Now, I think Rabbi Yochanan was also a student of Reb Yanai, I think, and here we see that he was possibly sitting before Rebbe. So Rabbi Yochanan had a few different teachers, it looks like. Anyways, Chad Omar Mipnema Botzun B'Tayra Ve'en Moskin B'Tayra. So one of these students said, either in front of Rebbe or Hillel, how come you need to harvest grapes in a pure vessel, but you do not need to harvest olives in a pure vessel? And one of the students said, how come we harvest grapes in pure vessels, yet we can harvest olives in impure vessels? So one student had said, ein moskin b'tayra, whereas the other one says moskin b'tuma. Right? One of them mentioned sort of the negative in relative to purity, whereas the other one mentioned impurity. So Omar, either Rebbe or Hillel, said, Muvtach ani bazeh, I'm convinced, I'm certain that Shemor Hora B'Yisrael, that this student who said in Botzun B'Tara as opposed to, in Moskin B'Tara as opposed to Moskin B'Tuma, so I'm confident that this student will be a great teacher in Israel. And sure enough, very shortly after this incident, this student became a great teacher in Israel. There were 3 students. There were 3 kohanim. So one of them said to the others, "Wow, I got from the lechem aponim, from the bread in the heichal, the size of a bean. So lucky." The other one said that I received a portion the size of an olive. The other one said, I got a size of bread that I got a amount of bread that was the size of a lizard's tail. Lucky guy. And they checked after him, and they saw that he actually was not from a very good family. So, meaning he didn't speak very nicely. He was talking about getting bread the size of a lizard's tail, and so it actually turned out that he wasn't actually even a Kohen, that he was a Cholol. He was coming from lineage that was not very good. So they were able to tell this because he didn't speak very nicely. But 1 second, we have a Mishnah in Kiddushin that says that if you have somebody who served in the Beis HaMikdash, right, on the Mizbeach, so you don't have to check out his family. Meaning, if you want to know what family he comes from, if he comes from a good family or a Kohen family, so if you know that he served in the Beis HaMikdash, you can be certain that he comes from a Kohen family, because there was like a panel of judges that would check on his lineage to make sure that he was in fact a Kohen. So if he got that far as being in the Beis HaMikdash and serving there, well then you can assume that he's a proper Kohen. So why were they, so he said that he got some bread that was the size of a lizard. Okay, maybe that wasn't the nicest thing to say, but why should that change the fact that they had already certainly tested his lineage and he was found to be a Kohen? So what's going on? All of a sudden they checked his lineage and he wasn't a Kohen? Well, wasn't he a Kohen when they checked his lineage initially? So lo tema shemetz psul ela ema shachatz psul. Don't say that it was an issue with his lineage. Say it was an issue with him. He was a nudnik, right? He wasn't speaking nicely, and they looked into him and they saw, oh yeah, this guy, he's a big nudnik. Right? What does Rashi say? That he says that he was a gas ruach, that he was very haughty, and he was mevaze kodshe shamayim, and he would disgrace the korbanos. So that is a problem. So even though his family was fine, he was not. So that to get rid of him, or if you want, I will say shani asam diu da'ara nafshe, that this was a unique case. That while yes, in general, if we know that somebody served in the Beis Hamikdash we don't need to check any further than that. We can assume that he comes from a priestly family. However, he kind of gave himself away and said, by speaking and talking about lizards' tails, so he attracted scrutiny to himself. So they had another look, maybe, I guess this time a better look, and they found that actually he did not come from a very good family. Another story about a nudnik. There was a certain Aramean, i.e. non-Jew, who was eating Korban Pesach in Jerusalem. Omar, and this Aramean said, Ksiv, while the pasuk says Kol ben nechar lo yochabo, that any ben nechar could be translated in different ways, but let's say it means a non-Jew, any Gentile should not eat the Korban Pesach. Kol aro lo yochabo, any uncircumcised person should not eat the Korban Pesach. Ve'ana ka'achilna mishufre shufre, and yet I, as a Gentile, am eating the best parts of the Korban Pesach. Mwahahaha. So he was kind of exalting himself that, look, the pasuk clearly says I should not be eating the Korban Pesach, and yet I get away with it, year after year. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says to this fellow, Mi kasafu lach me'aliyah. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, oh, hey, have you ever had the aliyah? What's the aliyah? The aliyah is the fatty tail of the sheep that goes on the mizbeach for God. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, oh yeah, you like Korban Pesach? Let me tell you, the best part is the aliyah. Have you ever had it? Amalei lo. He says, no, I never had the aliyah. Wow, it's really like that good? And Yehuda ben Beseira is like, yeah, it's like really, really good. Ki salakt lahasam, when you go over there, the next time you go to Jerusalem, and you join a group of people who are eating the Korban Pesach, Emalu, say to them, Sfuli me aliyah, give me some of the aliyah. I heard it's like thebomb.com. So, Kisalik Amalu, me aliyah safuli. So the next time this Aramean went to Jerusalem to eat from the Korban Pesach, and he found a group, and he said, hey, save some of the aliyah for me. I want some of the aliyah. Amrule, they said to him, aliyah legavoa salka. They said, what are you talking about? You want the aliyah? The aliyah goes on, we don't have it. We put it on the mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash. Amrule, they said to him, man amr lachachi. And then they were a little bit, taken aback. They're like, who suggested that you should ask us for the aliyah? So Amrule Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. They said, and he's like, what do you mean? Like the great rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira told me to ask for the aliyah. Amru, they said, my high, and they said, like, what the heck is going on? This guy's asking for the aliyah. Apparently Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira told him to ask, like, what's going on? So Bad Kubasi v'ashkechu da'armahu. So they looked after him and they checked and they found, oh, this guy, he's not even Jewish. So vikadlu, so they killed him. Okay. Guess he was going to think twice before he tried that again. Shalchule the Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. So then they sent to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Sorry, I just made myself laugh. Shlamlach Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira da'at ben Nitzivin u'mitzudas chaprusa b'Yerushalayim. So they sent to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira like a thank you letter, and they said, peace should be upon you, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, that you live in Nitzivin, yet your nets are spread out in Jerusalem. I guess that's how they used to get things done before like WhatsApp and stuff. They would have to like use clues, right? And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, while sitting in Nitzivin, was able to get the right clue by way of a message that he sent by somebody else, that they were able to pick up on the fact that this guy was a nudnik. Rav Kahana Chalash, Rav Kahana got sick. Shadru Rabbanan Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yoshua Breder of Idi. So the rabbi sent Rav Yoshua Breder of Idi to Rav Kahana. Which Rav Kahana do you think this was? You think this was Rav Kahana, who was the Talmud Chaver of Rav? Or do you think it was Rav Kahana, who was the Rebbe of Rav Ashi, or the contemporary of Rav Ashi, but later generation? Well, who was Rav Yoshua Breder of Idi? I don't know. Amule, they said to Rav Yoshua Breder of Idi, Zil Bidok, go and check my dine, go and see how Rav Kahana is doing. Also, Ashkeche Denoch Nafshe, by the time Rav Yoshua Breder of Idi got to Rav Kahana had already died. Kare levushe v'hadre lekare la'achore, so he tore his clothes, he rendered his garment, but then he put it around to his back, so that he wouldn't immediately give it away to the others and startle them. We had another place where we talked about tearing clothing and then turning around the shirt. That was with in Masechta Brachos with Rav Ada bar Ahava, who was a student of Rab. Maybe just like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir was giving clues as giveaways, maybe the Gemara is giving a clue to let us know that it's talking about Rav Kahana, who was a student of Rav. But anyways, so he tore his clothing because Rav Kahana had died. He then turned the shirt to his back so that the other rabbis wouldn't notice that his shirt was torn and be startled. Uvachi va'asi, and he came back to them crying. Amrule, they said to him, Nach nafshe, did Rav Kahana die? Amrulu, he said to them, Ana lo kamina, I didn't say anything. Umotzidiba hu ksil, anybody who says slander is a fool. Meaning, he just kind of hinted to the fact that Rav Kahana died. He didn't actually want to say it. Yochanan Chakoka nafak likiryasa. Yochanan Chakoka went to the city Kiasa. When he came back, Amrule, they said to him, Chita naisu yafis, was there really good wheat this year? So Amrulem, he said to them, Sorim naisu yafis. He said there was good barley, i.e. he didn't want to say no, there's not good wheat. Instead he said there's good barley, i.e. You're asking about wheat, I'm not going to say anything. I'll tell you there's good barley, but don't ask me about the wheat, i.e. things aren't so gishmak. So Amrule, they said to him, Tzei uvasar lasusim v'lachamorim. Uvasir lasusim v'lachamorim. So they said to him, go and announce that to the horses and the donkeys, meaning we're asking you about wheat and you're telling us about barley. Barley is like animal food. So they were like mocking him, right? They were saying, why are you telling us about barley? The Chsiv, as the pasuk says, that the barley and the straw is for the horses and I guess the donkeys. So, my havadeh the meimar. Well, what should he have said? Meaning he didn't want to say that the wheat was bad, because that's not like a nice way to say things. So he said the barley's good, instead of saying the wheat is good, hinting to the fact that the wheat is not good. So what should he have said instead? So, shtakid naisu chitin yafis, inami adashim naisu yafis. Well, either he could have said, last year the wheat was good, implying that last year was good, but not necessarily this year. Or he could have just used something that's more like maichol adam, that people eat, such as lentils, but don't use barley, which is animal food. So that was Daf Gimel of Masechta Pesachim. I thought it was a cool daf, right? So far, I think Masechta Pesachim gets like 2 thumbs up. I think I'm like kind of digging it. It's really nice. So what did we discuss? So 4 more proofs that or means night, and then really the duration of the daf. I think we could sum up as discussing that you should talk in a clean, proper way. That was Daf Gimel of Masechta Pesachim. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.